All right, hey everybody, welcome to How to EQ Your Tracks. And today we're doing female vocals. I'm your host, Steve Knotts. This is the Ableton production techniques. We got Matt Schultz, we got Shepherds. And today, there's my monitor stream. Thank you for hanging out. Let me do a quick little catch up for anybody who maybe missed the first ones. What we're doing is a series called Ableton Production Techniques, where I take all the tips and the ideas we talk about during track feedback, and I show you how to apply them in the actual music from my own tracks and in the future, well, sometimes in the past, from other tracks in the group, so we can actually show you the making of the tracks, the racks we're using, the effects we're using, native Ableton stock plugins that you can use in your music, and how to apply these techniques. So for example, if you're listening in, you're watching on track feedback and we're talking about, you got to do a little EQ cut at like 2.5K or a little boost at 500 or whatever. You might not know what those frequencies mean or how they feel in the music or what the problem is that we're hearing when we're using that solution. So this whole series is just showing you how to EQ your tracks. And this week is a fun one. We're doing female vocals. So I have here's the lesson plan for today. 2 sessions. One of them is a singer with a lead vocal and harmonies. And the other one is an MC with lyrics and a lot of layers. So hopefully within an hour, I can show you those 2 sessions and we'll hear what the original voice was. And we'll look at how did I work with EQ and filters to bring out the best of the voice, cut off the part we don't want, and really just polish it up. Now, people might argue about which plugins you use or which compressors and vintage gear. We're not getting into that. This is the basic audio engineering techniques that anybody could use with any devices. So I'm working in Ableton, but the techniques and tools I'm using are things you can find in any DAW, in many plugins, on analog mixing boards, in your 19-inch rack gear. These are the tools and techniques that we really use in the audio engineering world. So this is a universal techniques demonstrated in Ableton with some music sessions. Now for a quick session setup, one thing I recommend doing all the time is keeping a Spectrum Analyzer on your master channel. So anytime you need to look at a track, you can pull it up quickly. And I select the title bar of the Spectrum, put a little key command on there. So any place I am in the music, I could solo my kick drum, pull up the Spectrum, take a look what's happening in there, and just get a picture of the music. The other thing I do just for convenience during these streams is I map the letter Z onto the device activator switches, the mute switches on my returns. Because if I'm EQing a vocal, I want to hear the vocal and not hear the return. So, Matt and Shepherds, whoop, there it is. Thanks for hanging out, guys. So let's get a look at this session. I've got my usual buses set up for lows, beats, instruments, and vocals. And I'm gonna bring in the verse and the chorus so you can hear it at the beginning. Now, another thing I recommend is doing your arrangement so you can see where the vocals are and you can easily put some markers for the parts you want to mix.
I ask you, will you tire? Walking through this fire.
I've got this laid out with verses.
No longer,
I can see.
Which makes
choruses I can see. Markers.
All that you're making. Don't stop, we be creating. Take a moment and stay in our distance. Illusion. Leading into this suffering.
And now with my fabulous bus technique, I can just switch off all the other instruments. I got all the vocals coming in the Vox group. I'm gonna make these a little bit smaller.
Leaning in is all that is real.
And how do I have these channels laid out? Well, I've got chorus, harmonies, 2 layers, chorus vocals, 3 layers, verse vocals, main, second, and spoken. So what I'm doing here is the first thing is I'm just doing session setup and prep to make it really easy to find the sound I want and work with that sound. It's really frustrating if your tracks are unlabeled all over the place. Some of them are really tall, some of them really short, and you can't find the song sections. So the main thing when I'm EQing vocals is, it might sound really dumb, but put in some markers in your arrangement so you can find the vocals and get them organized in a place where you can easily click around and hear the layers. Make sure that number 1, you're hearing everything that's there. And number 2, you don't completely miss a section. It's actually really easy when you get into multi-tracking with a lot of overdubs. You could possibly forget that one song section has another overdub layer, and you might forget to mix it. That's happened. Or you might forget to even unmute it or something like that and lose some of the creative vibe. So you want to make sure you're hearing everything. And this also helps to understand where is the climax of the track. If you look at the vocal layer in verse 1, just look at the rough waveform size. These are, medium size. Verse 2, the waveforms are bigger. The singer's hitting it louder. So just with the mic technique and performance, verse 1 and verse 2 have a different level, which means your dynamics control is going to be, you have to be aware of that. And when a singer is pushing the dynamics harder or pushing louder, their tone might change, which could possibly affect some of your EQ decisions, or their breathing. You might have to cut out. If they're singing louder, using more air, they're going to breathe maybe faster, and that might affect what your editing is. Now, that's more about clipping out the noise, but when we're talking about EQing vocals, we're talking about cleaning up the voice and just being aware of what's there. So in this track, we listened to the beginning. I'm going to loop the verse part over here to work with our EQing so that I know that I'm hearing a part of the track that's the loudest. And if there's going to be a problem, I think it would probably show up in the louder section. Then we can go back and check the quieter section. So we're going to mix the verses and then listen to what's in the choruses. So we have 3 sections of verse.
Truth, it's getting harder.
Let's make it simple here.
Well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh, well,
I can hear some bleed in the mic where her headphones are going into the mic. So I can hear the track in the background of this little vocal. If you hear that also, that's coming from mic bleed. And notice that on this individual channel, main vocal, all I have is some pitch diagnosis stuff, a gate and a compressor. I don't even have an EQ on here
getting harder.
because I'm EQing at
oh, well, we'll
the group
hit
level.
It longer.
Now let's identify what other sounds are in here.
Truth, it's getting harder.
Second layer,
we'll
same thing,
hit it longer.
Gate and compression. So I'm doing dynamics control at the individual sound level because these are different takes, probably the same mic, probably the same day, but different take, different purpose. That's going to need different dynamics. And here's interesting creative decision to do.
Mask latent desire. Arise, thy bird of fire.
That has
Truth, it's getting harder.
fuzz layer
Oh,
on
well,
it,
we'll
which
hit
is
it longer. Mask latent desire. Arise, thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting.
So we have the lead vocal centered, second vocal off to the left, and the fuzz spoken vocal off to the right. Hello.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh, well, we'll hit it long.
And since this is in a group with the dynamics controlled at the individual channel level, I decided to EQ these in a group together and basically take care of my processing there. Showing you a de-esser because that's related to frequency, but let's bypass that, bypass EQ8, bypass our high pass filter, bypass the high pass.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh, well, we'll hit it longer.
I hear some nasty low end in there.
Latent desire. Arise, thy bird of fire.
What is that?
Truth, it's getting harder.
Anybody know?
Oh, well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire.
I think she's tapping her foot on the floor or possibly singing with her foot stomping. I mean, it's hard to imagine somebody would do that and not hear it, but that's...
Arise, thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder.
Maybe that's a puff of air hitting the mic somehow. Whatever it is, the first thing that I hear as a problem in this is way too much low end. So I kick in the auto filter, high pass filter mode.
Truth, it's getting harder.
Dial it up, listen.
Oh, well, we'll hit it longer.
And get rid of that.
Mask latent desire.
And if you're new to
Arise,
this,
thy bird of fire.
I know the guys watching right now know all this stuff, but for everybody watching the replay, what I like to do is kind of, I like to go too far and then come back. So with the auto filter, you're going to hear it where it starts low. I'm going to sweep it all the way up, identify when do I really start losing something important, then roll it back down, ask the question, when do I start hearing some garbage? And then find a middle place where I cut off the garbage, but I keep as much of the tone as I can. I want to keep the low frequencies in the body of her voice, but I also want to cut off that crap on the bottom.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh, well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire. Arise, thy bird of fire.
Now that's cutting out too much because it sounds like too thin.
Oh well, we'll hit it longer. An mask latent desire.
That sounds full.
Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer.
Now I'm hearing the thump, right?
Mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire.
So I'm going to roll that up just above 200 hertz to make sure the bottom end of that junk is cleaned out. And we can move on to the EQing portion of this vocal. And you might think it's weird to EQ these three together because there's distortion and the clean one together.
Truth,
Let's hear what happens.
Getting
Let me kick it in.
harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer.
And to make this fun,
desire.
I'm going to play with the EQ scale to show what we're doing.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer.
Exaggerating where I'm cutting.
Arise thy bird of fire.
And those are the frequencies
Truth, it's getting
I don't
harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer.
So one by one,
desire.
we got a ditch at
Arise thy
250.
bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer.
Getting rid of that.
Desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder.
Let me know if you can hear the 586 or the 600 hertz where I'm doing on band 4 right here. To me, it sounds like, it sounds like, I don't know if you ever took like a metal pipe and held it to your ear and listened to what was coming through it. It sounds like that, like a metallic kind of.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. An mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer.
Type in a 593 yes. If you can hear that, please type in 593 yes or 593 no. I can totally hear it. And anybody later might be wondering, how did I find that frequency? I'm using the frequency sweep technique. You never know what exact number is going to be good or bad in a track. Like there could be a bass line where 593 is like the most epic banging part of that bass. Like the voice of the bass could be really good at that frequency. And then you go to a different sound and that exact number could be horrible. So don't get too attached to the actual numbers. Think about the voice you're listening to and what is happening in that unique voice. So I'm going to boost up a frequency, sweep it around, show you how I can hear the bad part of this sound, and cut it out. So here we go. Boost.
Thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. An mask latent desire.
Actually,
arise thy bird of fire.
There's a little bump right there that
I
don't love.
Oh well, we'll hit it longer. An mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer.
Thank you, Matt.
An mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. An mask latent desire.
Now I'm doing some pretty exaggerated EQ right now with steep cuts.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. An mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. An mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. An mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder.
Kind of a whistly sound.
We'll hit it longer.
3.1K.
An mask latent desire.
That's obvious.
Arise thy bird of fire.
So the goal here is just to make it easy to listen to. When you're doing subtractive EQ and cutting out problem spots, it's not something that should really obviously make a huge difference to the final listener. You're just basically removing parts that don't need to be there quite as much. And when you get rid of them, they make it feel a little cleaner. And minus 11 is a lot of cut. So let's back that off a bit. This is a relatively extreme EQ for the purpose of illustrating, showing you and hearing it in my headphones while I'm talking and streaming. So, Shepard's good comment. Dynamic signals like this are not easy to EQ compared to a 4/4 kick. Yeah, that's, I think that's kind of proves the technique I was talking about here, where I'm doing a gate and compressor first on the sound and then EQing after compression so that I can kind of hear a consistent level and hear which frequencies need to get worked on.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire.
And what is this DS doing?
Harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire.
I'm hearing the S sound. I put the mouse on the spectrum, read what's in the little box over here, and it looks like...
Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder.
Looks like somewhere around 8,000, 9,000 hertz, we're having a little bit of a sibilance. So let's go to like 8,500 and...
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire.
Now you can see
Truth, it's getting harder.
the gain reduction is going to hit on the letters T and S. Truth.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire.
And that's an example of a type of dynamic EQ. The compressor is ducking the volume of the sound only when the S and T sibilants come in. So it's kind of like saying we want to have an EQ that only kicks in on that sound. So rather than putting in a notch at 9,000 or something with an EQ dip at that frequency, I'm using a de-esser for part of my tone control. Matt says the buzz is gone that was in there before. Yeah. So this is a basic look at how I'm EQing the verse vocals. And remember, these are routed over to the vocal bus. So I'm going to have another chance to EQ everything when it all comes together. These three groups, verse, chorus, and chorus harmony, are all routed to one bus over here, vocal bus, which has everything in all the vocals. So that's like the final picture. So if you thought about these as like individual records on a release, right? Aha! You could think, all right, these three recordings are like three separate tracks that are like one genre. Here's another, they're like two songs in another genre, and we're going to get them all mastered to finally sound good in the vocal bus, which would be like the album. So everything coming into the bus is going to get some kind of overall treatment to make it sound kind of together. And on the way to get there, we'll process them individually at the group level and the individual track level. So let me know if you have any questions. Good. So now that we've done some EQ cut, let's get out of solo mode and listen to how this verse sounds with all the music. It's good to cut in solo the track, listen to what's in each sound, apply your EQ cuts so you can really hear the garbage under the microscope and get rid of that stuff. Now let's drop it back in and ask the question, did I cut too much? Did I lose the soul of the sound? Does it still show up in the mix or not? What do we got?
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire.
And you know,
truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent.
What I'm doing right now is, as soon as I press play, I heard the S and the T on the word truth. And I thought, that's a lot of sharp sibilants on there. So I wanted to remove some of that S sound because it's a problem when you hear it on a loud speaker system. The first thing I did was I took band 2, kicked in a parametric EQ, swept around and located the frequency around 9,000 hertz. As soon as I put in an EQ dip, I liked it better. Then I tried a notch and made it wider to hear what happens. Now I'm just going to take a low pass filter, roll it down, and hear what happens when I completely cut off some of the high frequencies. This is kind of an experiment. I want to see how it sounds.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Arise thy bird of fire.
Now that's too much.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire.
So what I'm doing right now in the big picture is I'm choosing what type of EQ to solve the problem of the sibilant S sound. Clearly a low-pass filter cuts off way too much of the high frequencies, and that's not the right tool. A different filter shape can be different in situations, but I don't think so. Let's try a low shelf, because what this does is it makes an EQ cut that's kind of like an equal amount on all the frequencies. Like a low-pass filter takes a really steep cut, and the farther you go, the more frequencies get cut off. And I don't want to completely cut off the highs. I just want to like define a point like 8,000 and have everything above it come down a bit. So I think a high shelf EQ might be the best tool together with the de-esser.
Well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Mask latent desire. Mask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Leading it to mask latent desire. 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 Mask latent desire.
There we go. High shelf EQ is the solution. What I just did was I looped a part of the lyric that has a lot of S's. Mask, latent, desires. That's like three sibilant sounds right in this phrase. Also, because I like music, I made a loop that's actually a loop so I can hear the beat, stay on the beat, stay in the groove, feel the track. And then I can A-B, band 2, which is set to a high shelf EQ. Listen to the difference of on-off on the sibilants in this part of
mask latent desire. 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 Mask latent.
And there we go. Then the last thing I did after drinking coffee was I just raised the cutoff frequency or the active frequency of that shelf EQ. And that is how I found the right place to EQ. We had a sibilant thing. That was the problem. How do we solve the problem? Number 1, I tried a de-esser. It wasn't enough. Number 2, I tried a notch. That was too much. Number 3, I tried a low pass filter that was too much. It cut off too much of the sound. Finally, number 4, I used a high shelf EQ with a gain reduction, aiming to just reduce those problem frequencies and not completely cut them off or annihilate them. Making music is a compromise, and sometimes the sound that you don't like, you have to tolerate a little bit of it and blend it in rather than trying to just completely remove the whole thing. So you got to like think of EQs as kind of like more of like a gentle compromise of tone, not like totally boosting one thing and totally cutting one other thing, because it doesn't really work like that. The only way to totally cut is mute. You know what I'm saying? So let's keep moving, because I just spent a lot of time on that. The main idea here is that every different shape of EQ is a tool that works with frequency and has its own sound and its own unique flavor. And you need to pick the right EQ or filter shape to solve the problem. Let's go on to the chorus section. Let me know if you have any questions or if you think that I'm the best EQing teacher in the universe. No reason we can't have a little fun. Let's hear what's happening in the chorus.
Leading it to this suffering. Leading it, it's all that I feel. Leading it to this suffering. Leading it.
One thing I want to point out, this instrument group is very close to the vocal. That pad sound is very close to the vocal. So part of my EQ strategy for the master channel is going to ask the question, how do I get the instruments out of the way and the vocals up front? Because we don't want frequency masking where the frequency of the instruments is masking the frequency of the vocal and we can't hear the vocal. Just a side note, it's all big picture. and let's go in detail now.
Leaning in to this suffering. Leaning in, it's all that I feel. Leaning in.
Now these
to
are just
this
doubles you can hear.
Suffering. Leaning in, it's all very real. Leaning in.
And this is home recording from a person with a home studio. So some of these edits, there were breaths or mic noise or something that, I can't control that, but I work with what I have and try to make it sound as best as possible. You're not always going to get a perfect, clean studio recording through a U87 with a great preamp and everything. It's not going to happen.
To this suffering, leaning in, it's all that I
So you can see some pan position with these chorus vocals, get them spread out.
To this
And notice that, kind of like before, I didn't do anything on these channels. These three vocals are basically similar level, similar tone, nothing really comparatively different between them. So I decided to work with them as a group, and I'm doing pretty much the same thing as before. So I use the high-pass filter to cut out any low mic noise garbage. Let's review some of these frequencies. What I'm going to do is go through the frequencies, boost each one so you can hear what I was removing, and then cut them out.
Leaning in to this suffering. Leaning in, it's all that I feel. Leaning in to this suffering.
When she says to this, that low note, ooh, ooh.
Leaning in to this suffering. Leaning in, it's all that I feel.
Listen right here.
Leaning in to this suffering.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm almost EQing the notes that she's singing, but bringing down a little bit of that kind of overtone resonance in there. What else is in here?
Leaning in, it's all very real. Leaning in to this suffering. Leaning in, it's all that I feel. Leaning in to this
on the word in.
Suffering. Leaning in, it's all very real. Leaning in to this suffering. Leaning in.
Okay, what's next?
All that I feel. Leaning in to this.
Oof. Right there on the in-between when she's kind of breathing, there's like a whistly sort of
Suffering. Leaning in. It's
so cutting that out, and then again that whistly.
Leaning in to this suffering. Leaning in.
So I'm pulling down some of the similar frequencies we heard in the main vocal. Why? Well, same voice, same mic, same key signature, same song, same melody notes, or some of the same notes. So the frequency problems we found in the lead vocal are very similar to the chorus. So I'm not going to say I copied the exact EQ, but once you get a handle on where the main problem frequencies are in one track, you can use that EQ as kind of a template for other sounds that are similar, especially when it's multi-tracked. So I'm going to move on here because I do want to show you another whole project.
It's all that I feel.
Let's check the chorus harmonies.
To this.
And what's going on here? Oh, okay. She has an interesting technique of layering harmonies only on some parts. So check out what's going on.
Leaning to this suffering. Leaning in.
That was her. That gap on leaning in.
Leaning in.
Why did she put a gap there? Well, I think that's a very loud note in the other chorus track, right? So strategically, she's putting her volume in a place where she needs it.
Leaning in, it's leaning in, leaning in.
The second half of the word leaning, nang, leaning in. She doesn't want to hit the nang on the chorus harmonies.
Leaning in, leaning in.
I think that's interesting.
It's all that I feel. Leaning in to this.
again, working on the harmonies as a group. Let's make a loop. Loop the group.
All that is feeling and into this. All that is feeling and into this. All that is feeling.
By now, what do we got? High pass filter at 200. EQ frequencies dipping out 250, 586, 879, 1.5, 3.85, 7.9. Pretty much the same thing as the chorus vocal. And really, I was kind of just doing dynamics processing differently and pan position to get the chorus vocals and harmonies
All that I feel.
easy to work with. So for me, the main thing, the reason I put these into two separate groups instead of one big chorus group is I wanted the harmonies, track 18, on a separate volume control so that I could find the right place to harmonize. That was pretty much my grouping strategy. Let me know if that makes sense with grouping. Type in GRP, yes. I'll make it easy for you if you're on your phone. So now what we have is the lead vocal with the verse, EQ'd, compressed, spread out with some stereo motion, blended with the distortion thing. We've got the chorus with a few layers, EQ'd, compressed, stereo field, opened up. Same thing with the harmonies. Individual treatment, pan position, and now we can bring them all back over to the Vox channel, the main vocal bus. How do I find what we're listening to? Let's open up our view of the channels, and I want to take you through kind of like what I think of as the emotional peak of the track and hear the whole thing.
To this suffering, leading in, it's all very real. Leading in to this suffering, leading in, it's all that I feel. Leading in to this suffering, leading in, it's all
Right
that
here.
is real. It's all that is real.
Aha. Okay, so that's how it all comes together. I love the breath at the end of this last thing. I want to just show that off. This is very expressive, right? So I hope that helped. I'm not sure I did something that'll help everybody on every female vocal track, but if you get the basic concept of, number one, have your different takes organized into the same place in your session so you can take an overview of the arrangement and find out where to mix each part and understand which one is the loudest one because you need to mix that. So first, organizing. Number two, grouping. Lead vocals in one stereo group with the overdubs in a stereo group. Second, stereo group for the chorus sounds so that you can make each song section kind of mixed a little bit differently. And a lot of times, like especially in pop vocals, chorus might be louder, lead vocal might be different on the third verse versus the second verse, whatever. You're going to need to do a ton of automation. We didn't even touch that topic. And Matt, why do I get the Cranberries vibe? That's a nice compliment. And then what I did once I had the sounds grouped was I just listened for problems in low frequency, mid-range, and high frequency. I used some judicious EQ cuts first, and then listened for what sounds might need to get boosted, which we didn't even do at the group channel level. So we got our groups, we got our sounds, dynamics control on the individual channels because each track is a separate performance that might have different mouth noise to hit with the gate, different dynamics and volume to hit with a compressor. So I was pretty much treating each sound as a different dynamic unit, but I treated them as the same frequency unit because same voice, same mic, same session, same day. That's, I know from the recording person. So that's why I chose to EQ them in a group together and process the dynamics separately. And remember, a de-esser the tool is a compressor, but the function is a frequency control. And these things do overlap. So the last thing let's look at is on the vocal bus, I did have some boost here in the mid-range. So let's run back through this part. I'll just play with that EQ and show you what I was doing, and maybe we'll be able to hear why.
Rise like bird of fire, leaning into this suffering, leaning in, it's all that I feel, leaning in to this suffering, leaning in, it's all very real, leaning in to this suffering, leaning in.
That's an interesting frequency, 371. It's not far away from 250 where we were cutting out. And just as I was listening and doing this boost cut, I can hear a few notes sound good with it, and then other notes I don't even notice. So my original plan with this was adding a little bit of that body of the vocal and make it so that she is the main character.
Rise like bird of fire, leaning into this suffering, leaning in, it's all that I feel, leaning into this suffering, leaning in, it's all very real, leaning into this suffering.
It's not a huge thing, but a little bit of boost.
It's all that I feel, leaning to this suffering, leaning in, it's all that is real.
So what I'm doing is a gentle boost with a wider range for that mid-range sound, which is almost like pushing up the volume of this group, but not quite. And then again, I hit a couple topics, couple frequencies on the whole bus that I felt needed to come down. 1.8, 2.7, 8, 4.2. And as I boosted them, I instantly heard that whistling, shrill kind of ping sound that I took it down. And personally, I find it works better to do multiple stages of gentle cuts rather than putting in a huge steep notch at one point and having it like extreme EQing. And that's similar for compression strategy too. Like you can get a better result by doing a few stages of gentle gain reduction and makeup gain boost rather than trying to use one compressor, massive smash of gain reduction, then jack up the makeup gain. It doesn't sound the same. It doesn't sound as natural, and it just doesn't sound as good. So let me move on to the next session. I know we just spent 40 minutes looking at EQing lead vocal, chorus, backup vocals, and everything. Let's go to a different kind of voice on a different kind of track. So that's going to be the Up In Here remix. And we're moving to an MC who's doing more like spoken rap vocals. Not like rap, but like more like you'll hear. And let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for hanging out and watching. Check. Spinny ball. Ram. There we go. And again, what's the first thing you notice? I see a bunch of vocals and I can pick out where the different parts of the track are because I have some markers. One says peak, one says vocal effects. The beginning has lyrics or, whatever it is. So let's look at what's going on with the layout. It's a Steve track, so you got mono, low group, got drums, got instruments, and a bus. Vocals are a bus pulling together this group effects section. So we have a bunch of channels of group effects, or a group of vocal effects, and then a lead vocal that says main and doubler. And seriously, y'all, the more you label your channels, the easier your mix life will get. So as a technique, first I want to hear what the lead vocal is doing. So let's find a part of the song where the lead vocal is happening. And then I want to hear what the vocal group is doing. Let's turn off our group and just check out what's happening with the track.
I said, all things clear, nothing to fear. We up in here, we up in here.
So
I said all
it's in
things
between
clear,
talking and singing, right?
nothing to fear. We up in here. The atmosphere is so sincere. We up in here. We up in here.
And what are these two vocal
the
layers?
atmosphere is so sincere.
Let's get a little loop going on there.
I said all things clear, nothing to fear.
That's
we
our
up in here.
Whoa.
We up in here.
main
I said
lead
all
vocal.
things clear,
And
nothing to fear. We up in here.
the doubler. And that double is kind of,
We up in here.
so in a similar way to last time, the vocalist decided to record a second layer and emphasize a few words, but not every word. And if we look at this track, you can see that sometimes the verse is on the main lead vocal up here.
And proudly declare,
Other times it's down here.
persevere, and proudly declare.
Now, I almost cut these two apart and comped them together, but there's a few places where that didn't work
We up in here.
with the double. So I decided to put these two in a group and then just basically mix the group as if it's one single track, which is why you don't see any audio effects on the individual channels. And this looks familiar. We got a high pass filter around between 1 and 200 hertz, EQ8, and some dynamics control. So let's take a look at what these are doing.
We up in here. I said all things clear, nothing to fear. We up in here. We up in here. I said all things clear, nothing to fear. We up in here. I said all things clear, nothing to fear.
Okay.
We up in here. We up in here. I said all things clear,
Bypass all these.
nothing to fear. We up in here.
Now I hear the bottom.
I said all things clear, nothing to fear. We up in here.
And I love Spectrum
We
because
up
it
in
shows you
here.
really clearly where the peaks of the voice are. The notes that she's saying or singing and the resonant parts of the voice.
I
You-
said all things clear, nothing to fear. We up in here.
You can clearly see below 100 hertz. That's not
I said all things
the
clear,
real important part of the
nothing to
vocal.
Fear. We up in here. We up in here. I
So
said
right,
all
what I'm doing
things-
right now is I'm asking the question, how much low end can I cut off? And I move the mouse around on the spectrum line. I can see in the little box, it's saying about 160, maybe 120 at the lowest. So go to my auto filter, 165 hertz, put in that number, and
I said all
you can
things
almost stop
clear,
there. But to demonstrate the
nothing
technique,
to fear.
put in a high pass
We up
filter.
in here.
I'm trying to get rid of the lows, so I'm
We
going to
up
roll it
in
up until I
here.
notice
I said all things clear, nothing to fear.
it's way too thin. Let's bring it back down.
Yeah. I said all things clear, nothing to fear. We up in
That sounds
here.
pretty natural at 300,
We
but
up
let's see
in
how much more
here.
of the low end we can
I
bring
said
in.
all things clear, nothing to fear. We up in here.
That still sounds natural at 170.
I said all things clear, nothing to fear.
And then down at 80 hertz, it still sounds kind of natural, but I know that we don't need all of that low end. And I know we have a bass line and a kick drum. So I'm going to sacrifice some of the low range of the voice to make space for bass. And that's why I chose 165. That's the
said all
technique.
things
Now let's go
clear.
to the EQ.
Nothing to fear. We up in here.
Matt, I find it fascinating how bland things sound when you deconstruct them to individual elements and they begin to shine in the context of a track, making something that's greater than the sum of the parts. I think I could not have said it better myself. When you get a solo vocal track that's up on the mic and flat and there's all kinds of garbage noise from the background or whatever, it does not sound that good. I mean, I bet even if you took a Taylor Swift vocal with the raw mic recording that's at a nice low level so it doesn't clip, that probably would not sound that amazing. But you dress it up with the flash bulbs and the makeup and everything, and you turn it into a different kind of a vocal. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. cleaning up the crap out of a vocal, going through the steps to identify where is the really core of where the voice sounds good. Let's pull out those annoying resonances, build up some layers, pan them apart, add some reverb and delay, and all of a sudden you got something that sounds like a record. So I'm so glad you said that. That was a great comment.
We up in here.
I'm going to spin through these
Set all
EQ
things
frequencies
clear.
and boost a
Nothing
couple
to
things and
fear.
ask the question, what are we doing
up
here?
in here.
Why did I put 199? What sounds bad at
I
199?
set all things clear.
Oh,
Nothing to fear. We up in here. We up in here. I set all things clear.
well, obviously there's like a woo
Nothing
woo
to
woo.
fear. We up in here.
Next up, 400.
I set all things clear. Nothing to fear. We up in here. We up in here. I set all things clear. Nothing to fear. We up in here.
Interestingly enough, these are an octave apart. 200 hertz, double that, you get 400. Double that, you get 800. So I'm doing some octave EQ right here, finding a resonance that sounds bad and actually finding that every octave of that frequency also sounds bad.
I set all things clear.
Whoops.
Nothing to fear.
Don't
We
wanna
up
do
in
that.
here. We up in here. I set all things clear.
I think 15 dB
Nothing
might be a
to
little too much
fear.
right there.
We up in here.
Let's go to 800 and hear what that
I
octave
set
sounds
all
like.
things clear. Nothing to fear. We up in here. We up in here. I
Okay.
set all things clear. Nothing to fear. We up in here. I set all things clear. Nothing to fear. We up in here. We up in here.
It's almost like a
I set
resonator right
all
now.
things clear. Nothing to fear. We up in here. I set all things clear.
So octave EQ is really important. If you're EQing a sound that's instrumental and harmonic and melodic, any kind of instrument sound, when you find a good frequency that's part of the tone that you like, you can boost a little bit, double that frequency to get to the next octave up and boost that. And because of the overtone series that's part of the physics of sound, it's going to sound good when you boost the octave and the next octave or the perfect fifth above it. Those are good frequencies to play with. And then by the same principle, when you find a sound where the natural resonance is bad at one frequency, go an octave higher and you could cut that. It's probably going to help. Go an octave lower and cut that and it's going to help. So if you're at 150 and it sounds like garbage, notch that out. Check out 75 hertz. I bet it's going to help to cut that out or even high pass filter up around it. And if you're at 150 and you cut it out, go to 300. Double the frequency to go up an octave, cut the frequency in half to go down an octave. And because of the physics of how sound works, those frequencies are going to work better for cutting and boosting. It's really cool how that works.
Nothing to fear. We up in here.
I'm glad we got to talk about
We
that.
up
That's
in here.
really,
I set all things clear.
it's simple, but it takes a
Nothing to
while to
fear.
start using it.
We up in here.
Ooh. Ooh.
I set all things clear. Nothing
I
to
know you can hear
fear.
that.
We up in here. We up in here.
So we're chopping things
I set
out
all things
and
clear. Nothing to fear.
that little whistly
We
thing.
up in here. I set all things clear. Nothing to fear. We up in here.
Perfect illustration
We
of why
up in here.
1.3 sounds like
I
crap
set all
sometimes.
things clear. Nothing to fear. We up in here.
Let's see what 2.4
I
sounds
set
like.
all things clear. Nothing to fear. We up in here. We up in
That one is hard to tell in solo. This is a good place to put the rest of the track back in and ask the question, if I want more of this vocal, should I raise the volume or can I take a little bit of an EQ boost to pull out the clarity of the vocal?
I set all things clear.
Looking at band
Nothing
7.
to fear. We up in here. We up in here. I set all things clear. Nothing to fear. We up in here. I set all things clear. Nothing to fear.
So this boost is subtle. It's just raising a little bit of the crispy part of the voice and kind of just making the vocal feel a little bit louder. It's almost the same thing as pushing up the volume fader at this point, but not quite the same. And I'm doing a gentle boost on the group after doing the cuts to get that lead vocal coming forward. Now let's go to our effects group and meet the sounds. Matt Schultz, EQ only when necessary. I agree. Don't go crazy and do it just because you got a new VST plugin. Group effects. There's some creative sound design on here, so let's mute these one by one. And here, what is Vox Crunch? What is that? What does that mean?
Things clear, nothing to fear. We up in here. We up in here. I set all things clear.
Now, the artist gave me these with effects on them and said that, well, these were stems from the original, and I remixed it with different beats and bass line. So I had some processing already on here.
Nothing to fear. We up in here.
That's fun.
We up in here.
Got the reverb return. And I believe there's a delay. And from the tone of this one, you could almost put this in the same group with the lead vocal. But I kept it in the effects group for mix strategy, so I could find the vocal, mix that, and find out where the verses are, and then mix the effects section by itself when I wanted to do that. So let's look at these. What did I do on the individual channels? I'm sure you recognize the strategy by now. High pass filter frequency 165, copying the same frequency that I found in the first vocal. No reason to change that. And then cutting and boosting up 200 hertz, 400, octave, 808. Okay, so we're basically copying a lot of the same frequencies. On the reverb channel, a little bit higher high pass filter because I didn't want the lower tone in the reverb. A little bit more of a high shelf boost because sometimes reverb, the high frequencies are really where the reverb lives. I'm not going to go through these one by one. If you get the strategy, you get it by now. The techniques you get from practicing. The vocal wide effects. What did that sound like again? Where is the wide effects? It's labeled. I can find it. It's in the view. I can find it.
Persevere.
Oh, the one with the chorus. Yeah. So pretty simple. High pass filter, bit of EQ.
A love affair.
A love
But those
affair.
we care. But those we care.
And the crunch layer. Cut the highs. Aha, we got something going on here. What's that
And
boost?
proudly declare more justice for us legionnaires.
1.2.
A love affair. But those we care. Persevere and proudly declare more justice for us legionnaires.
What I was doing here is asking the question, what is the core of this sound that makes the crunch important in the track? Where do we hear the crunch? We want the crunch to show up in the mix. Which part of this channel or what part of the frequency range is the crunch?
Affair, but those we care.
And I found it right there around 1.3. So I boosted that up.
We persevere and proudly declare.
Let's pull these back together as a group.
justice for us legionnaires.
And notice that these are also,
persevere.
some of these have stereo
persevere,
elements.
and
So
proudly
I'm not going to pan 23, but I do want some pan. The vocal reverb is stereo. And I think that delay, I know that delay was stereo, right? Totally. So, since we have stereo field in 23, 24, and 25, I'm not going to pan 22. That can be just like the center kind of dry effect. It's not dry, but like the center of the effects group is going to be this one.
persevere and proudly declare more justice for us legionnaires. A love affair, but those we care. But those we care.
And then on the overall group, oh, no effects on that. Look at
We
that.
persevere and proudly
And let's
declare
bring our beats back in.
more justice for us legionnaires.
Compositionally,
A love affair.
do you hear any instruments that are clashing with the voice? There's an arpeggiator that's got a filter moving, but there isn't a lot of high frequency stuff going on in this track. So the vocal has the whole upper mids to exist and live.
We up in here.
This was before I met Mindbender. Matt Schultz, I would roll back the mids on the wide vocal with the mid side EQ. Do you mean the chorus vocal? Are you talking about...
Persevere and proudly declare more justice for
Yeah, I hear
us
which
legionnaires.
I don't actually use mid side EQ very much at all, so that's kind of a personal style for me, but I definitely respect what you're saying. on that one, because that's a good technique sometimes.
And proudly declare
Okay, so now
justice for
we've got our vocal effects. We
legionnaires.
got our lead vocal.
A love affair. For those we care. For those we care.
And the fun thing is I can pull up the lead
We persevere and proudly declare
and mix
more justice for
all those effects
us legionnaires. A love affair.
with the kit control from 21.
Those we care.
So my channel 21 group level lets me have volume control of that whole effects group. Now that I know the effects group is mixed together as a unit, as a stereo field within the group track, now I can take that whole group track, bring it in compared to the lead. I can easily find a section of the song where all those sounds are happening, like right here. Loop that,
We up in here.
get it going.
We up in here. We up in here. We up in here.
And it's electronic music, so it's okay for the vocal
We
to
up in
sound
here.
a little distorted, a little bent, a little weird,
We up in here.
a little affected.
We up in here.
As long as it sounds good coming through the mix.
We up in here.
And I think on here,
We up in here.
watch out.
We up in here.
So again, at the
We
vocal bus, now that we're combining all the groups together, there's our lead vocal, there's our group effects. With our routing, we have them set to go audio out to vocal bus. Vocal bus is set to no input, monitor input. So now whatever we do on this channel 29 is going to affect everything in the whole track. Guess what? High pass filter down at 125, compression, and a tiny little bit of EQ dip. What was Steve hearing that day, and why did I EQ that? Let's find out. I don't actually remember.
We up in here.
What's at 949?
We up in here.
Oh,
We up in here. We up in here.
do you hear that? 915?
We up in here.
It's kind of scraping.
We up in here. We up in here.
That makes sense.
We up in here.
And what are we doing at 2.4?
We up in here.
Ah, yeah.
We up in here. We up in here.
You hear that?
We up in here.
A little bit of that whistling resonant thing that we're dipping out.
We up in here. We up in here.
This is one of my few plugins that I use a lot that's not a live plugin.
We up in here.
Check this one out.
We up in here.
Cranking it up, right?
We up in here. We up in here. We up in here. We up in here. We up in here.
So what we did so far was we organized our session so we could find each part when it's happening and make sure we didn't miss a sound or forget to EQ any sounds. Number two, we put them into groups where we have the lead vocal, which is the most important part of the delivery. That's in a stereo group. And then we have the effects channels, which are all the reverb and modulated ones. Those are in a second group. We did individual channel listening to cut or deal with nasty frequencies. And then we put them all back together in the stereo groups, checked out the tonal balance, checked out the stereo field, brought those all over to one bus group, checked how that sounds with the instruments and drums and beats, did a little bit of EQ dip and some final dynamics in a last stage to get the whole group of everything sounding good. Let's just visit this last little piece at the end here that we didn't listen to yet. And the reason is, listen to what the synth is doing, kind of like at instrumentally, right? The synth is opened up, it's in the highs now. That might clash with the vocal.
Persevere and proudly declare more justice for us legionnaires. A love affair for those we care. For those we care.
Right?
We persevere and proudly declare more justice for us
so good.
Those we care.
And that's kind of like the outro effects. That sub. Matt Schultz, the bubble synth line definitely clashes with the vocal. I have to agree. Whoever made this track was a bubblehead. That was me. Yeah, it's electronic music. The lead takes over at some points and pops up through the track. And you're right, there is a frequency clash right there. As I was saying earlier, it's a compromise with the frequency range where you don't always get every sound in the perfect presentation all the time. So that's my strategy for EQing. And again, this is electronic music. You can kind of take more liberties than you would take if you were doing a jazz vocal record or even a rock record or a pop record. And those situations where the lead vocal is the face on the cover, is the name on the album, is the reason people go to the concert, and the character is why they buy tickets. When you're doing that, your vocal EQing strategy better put that voice up front and everybody else has to shut up. You know what I mean? Like a Madonna record or something. For electronic music, we have the freedom to treat voices as pure sounds and just looping a little piece, kind of making it trippy and hypnotic where the voice becomes a sound and it's not supposed to be like a realistic, perfect opera singer or something. So I don't know. That's how I think about it. Thanks for watching, everybody. It's been about an hour, so I'm going to stop here and take these notes with this replay and put it into the course called How to EQ Your Tracks. Secretly, I've been recording these videos and getting ready for updating this course, which is at courses.mixatexture.com. It's literally all about how to EQ your tracks. You're going to learn the different types of EQ, how they function, and when to use them. So like when I gave that example about taking down the high frequencies where I was experimenting with a notch filter and a parametric EQ dip, and then finally I decided the high shelf EQ worked best to take down some of those high frequencies and have a de-esser. That's what you learn in this course. You get a pack of presets. Let me show you. I'm going to scroll down here because I'm really proud of this. This is a fun course. It combines a lot of real audio engineering with practical tools, custom made for electronic music to make your life easier. So we talk about how do you know which kind of EQ to use on the sounds, how to find the right frequencies to cut and boost, understanding what's important in a sound so you don't waste 5 hours in the studio fishing for frequencies. You learn to understand, here's what's important. This is the frequency I want to keep. Cut off the rest of the stuff like we were doing with auto filter and spectrum analyzer to see the garbage crap in the low end, roll up the high pass filter, get rid of the garbage, and keep the part of the sound that we want. Just like peeling an apple, take off the skin, eat the fruit. You don't eat the seeds, you eat the fruit. Same thing with EQ. Now, that's a little picture of EQ8 because I like it. This comes with a pack of presets. People argue about this all the time, but let me tell you, presets are a fantastic starting place to use with your sounds. You don't just put them on and leave it there. That's not what you're here to do. You put them on the sound and then tweak them a little bit. And I made some presets customized for electronic music. Bassline, high, mid, sub bass. Drums like beat loops, hi-hat, kick high, kick low, depending on what genre of music you're making. A low kick would be like house and techno. High kick might be for something like breakbeats, where you have a big dubby sub bass, like a drum and bass, like huge bass, and then little kick drums breaking through on the off-tempo thing. We got keyboards, bright, warm, piano, acoustic chords, synth leads, synth pads, all those mid-range sounds where you're doing keyboards and synths. And clearly you're going to have to dial these in depending on your instrument and the position it's playing in the sound in the song. But they give you a starting place. And then we have vocals, backups, female and male, which will help you pull out the frequencies that are important and cut out the frequencies that are getting in the way. And they're really easy to just, you select a preset, hit enter, drop it on the track, and you're much farther along with your EQing to save time in the studio. Now, this also comes with a bunch of PDF guides that you can download and read and study for later. Cheat sheets, references, stuff about EQing with pitch, like when I was talking about octave EQ. That's in there, and it'll help you understand which frequency to use on which instrument. And then all these replays. You're going to learn about the range of human hearing. What are these numbers in hertz? What kind of EQ do I need to use and why? This is the reference library of the documents. Intro to EQs, the EQ and filter types document, frequency landscape of what we're hearing, secrets of spectrum, how to use the spectrum analyzer to see your sound and find problems that you can't necessarily hear if your ear training is not that good yet. EQ spreadsheet helps you understand which frequency works on which instrument. Filter pairs is more about like the structure and function of filters as part of EQs. And the frequency and pitch chart is really handy. If you're into tuning your kick drums to match your bass line, this is the chart for you. It connects things like what note is at 100 hertz, or if you're EQing the note C in your sub bass, it's 65 hertz. How did I know that? Well, I learned it, but you can learn it too, and it's in this course. And you can go through all this stuff now with presets and video replays and some project packs that you can download and actually do some EQing like you see in these videos. Normally, this is $100. That's cheap, by the way. What you're learning here is university level material that would take you years to learn, find, put together, and practice on your own if you had to do it on your own. And you don't even have to pay $99 because you can put in the coupon code EQ 2022, drop it down to $49.50, which is an insane price for what you're getting in this course. These are essential audio engineering tools that are going to help you for your entire life as a producer, whether you're in Ableton Live or Pro Tools or using Soundtoys VST plugins, or you're working on an analog mixing board or a 19-inch hardware rack or a guitar pedal. I mean, anywhere you see an EQ or a filter, this stuff is going to help you. So that's why it's important to put some money into your education and buy this course. I'm going to drop the link in the YouTube video. And while I'm doing that, I'll give you guys a couple seconds to type in any questions you might have. And let's listen to some music. Make sure everything's unmuted.
I said all things clear, nothing to fear.
There's the course link.
We up in here, we up in here. I said all things clear, nothing to fear. We up in here. The atmosphere is so sincere. We up in here, we up in here. The atmosphere is so sincere.
Okay, I just dropped the course link into the chat with the coupon code applied. So you just click that link, it'll pull up the site, 50% off, $49, grab this course. We're also gonna bring you into Discord where you can post your mixes and get some feedback on your EQ homework, which is a special thing that everybody needs. And you just wanna know people are listening to your music and giving you some help on that. Oh, Matt said that actually helps me a lot. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that because your tracks already sound really good. So if this is helping you, I must be doing something right.
We up in here.
And thanks to Sky Deep for this track and Shay in Pittsburgh for the track that we played before. Okay, it's 1:08. I'm going to get off of here. Thanks for watching. We'll be back on Saturday for track feedback. And that's it for me. Let me get to my logout screen. There we go. All right. If you have any questions, get in touch, steve@mixatexture.com, and I'll see you inside. Thanks, everybody.